myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you.
Good afternoon, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Tuesday brings us Ross Gregory slightly later due to my activities this morning. Afternoon, Ross, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, all good, mate. Good to see you. And wow, what a result of the weekend, mate. Still over the moon about that performance and result against Manchester United. What did you make of it?
Absolutely outstanding, Steve. Absolutely outstanding. I think heading into the game, I'll be honest, I was really quite confident. And that's, for people who know me, know that my glass is more often than not half empty than it is half full, especially around football and around Newcastle. Once bitten, twice shy, as the saying goes. But heading into the game, I was really, really confident of a certainly good performance. I thought the international break probably came at a good time for Newcastle, able to get a bit of warm weather training, get a few players, who've had a bit of, a couple of knocks and niggles back and get the fitness up of your Callum Wilsons and your Alan St. Maximums and one or two others who've been carrying a few kind of little niggles and knocks. I felt with Casemiro being suspended that was a massive, massive blow for Man United. And I really felt that Newcastle's midfield could capitalise on that, and so it proved. I mean, it was probably, you can talk maybe about the Arsenal game at the end of last season, and there's obviously been some great performances this season as well. But I think, given the nature of the game, the calibre of the opposition, what was at stake in terms of going for a Champions League place and moving up into third place, I think it was probably arguably the most complete performance, or the best performance under Eddie Howe. Yes, they made life a little bit harder for themselves than what they possibly could have done if they'd taken 2 or 3 chances in the first half, or one or two of those chances in the first half. But I just thought that the relentless nature of the pressing, of the intensity of they just didn't take their foot off Man United's throat all game, even going 1-0 up and having 15-20 minutes to see out the game. In the past, Newcastle would have maybe gone a little bit defensive and gone back into their shell and try to hang on a little bit, but they didn't. They just kept going forward, kept their foot on the throat, and got the rewards in the end. And I thought it was just an absolutely fantastic win, fantastic performance, up there with the very best that we've seen this season.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It was probably the performance of the season. John Askew says, hi everyone, it was Manchester United supposedly, but it was more like Manchester disunited, Manchester disorganised, or perhaps more significantly, Manchester disinterested. He says that takes nothing away from us. I think most of us were expecting a close contest, but we were tremendous. A 2-0 thrashing, if there is such a thing. One class aspect of that game was that we must have had 5 or 6 candidates for man of the match. For what it's worth, Isak edged Bruno for me, but take your pick. The whole game reminded me of the Arsenal game last night. Good assessment, John. I've got to be honest. Yeah, I think it was really difficult to pick a man of the match, Ross. If the truth be told, I think collectively it was a wonderful team performance.
It absolutely was, yeah. I think obviously, I think Sky gave it to Bruno, and I wouldn't disagree with that. Happily, I certainly wouldn't disagree with the fact that he was outstanding. But he was one of a number of players. I thought that the 3 lads in the midfield, Bruno, Sean Longstaff, and Joe Willock were I've used the word relentless already, and that's what they were. They did not give. They did not give the Manchester United midfield any time on the ball. Didn't give the defence any time on the ball. The running stats must be through the roof after Sunday's game, but they weren't the only ones. I thought Alan St. Maximum had probably his best game that I've seen in a while. still frustrated at times, but he did have an end product. He gave Dalot a torrid time. Alexander Isak just continues to really, really impress me. I thought Sven Botman was outstanding again. But the full team were the full team. You couldn't pick a weak link. You couldn't pick a bad performance. All the way through from Nick Pope didn't have too much to do, but what he did do, he coped with it really well. I worried a little bit at times about Dan Burn. I thought potentially Anthony up against him. He's given him a couple of tough games, but very, very early on he looked a threat. But then Dan Burn just stepped up and snuffed that danger out. And the more pressure that each player piled on their opposition, on their direct opponent, their direct counterpart, they just wilted. Man United just absolutely wilted. And yeah, they were disunited and disorganised. I was very, very disappointed in Manchester United. I thought it was a really poor performance by them, but that should not take away from how good Newcastle were. And the performance of Eddie Howe's players didn't allow Man United to get into the game, didn't allow them to get a foothold, didn't allow them to kind of show what they can do. It was a perfect game, perfectly executed plan, I think, from Eddie Howe and the players, and it should give them so much confidence going into the rest of the season.
Yeah, I would agree. John says, I really believe that some of the players were affected by the crowd. He says, we almost take it for granted now, but the atmosphere now is something else and must negatively impact the opposition, in my opinion. Probably the atmosphere of the season now was certainly as good as the Chelsea game, Ross.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't in the stadium on Sunday to experience that, but everybody I've spoken to has said it was fantastic. It certainly came through that way on watching it on the TV. It came through. The atmosphere was buoyant and raucous, and it shouldn't be underestimated how much of an impact that has on both positively for Newcastle's players, and also negatively against Man United. There was some really interesting stats about Manchester United's away performances and the away results this season against teams in the top half of the table, and they do wilt a little bit. Getting beat 7-0 at Anfield and thumped it at Man City. Newcastle capitalised on that. You need to have big game players. You need big performances, and I love the way that Newcastle players kind of feed into the crowd, and the crowd feeds back off them. So Dan Burn getting the crowd going when he's made a tackle, Bruno getting the crowd going when they've made a tackle, the celebrations, the way that they try to whip that crowd up. Not that it needed whipping up, but both sets are feeding off each other. It's a really united club at the minute, both with the fan base, the players, the coaching staff, and everybody around it, and it's great to see.
Yeah, my worry about Isak is that he puts so much into the performance, he might struggle a bit tomorrow, but I'm not too worried. Yeah, 3 games in a week's, what we're going to have to get used to if we do qualify for Europe, John, which looks most certainly in some way, shape or form we will be. But I wouldn't worry too much about Isak. He's back. He's backfiring on all cylinders now, and I think the plus point, another plus point for me was just the strength and depth on the bench, Ross. I mean, Newcastle. We've often talked about a weak squad, weak in numbers, but the fact that Eddie Howe gets the best out of, the likes of Jacob Murphy, Joe Linton, Almiron, now players that we probably looked at and thought, I'd rather not have him, on the pitch in a black and white shirt. Now we're saying, well, actually, he's doing well. He deserved his starting place, Murphy. But yeah, Isak, I mean, he was brilliant, and he's an international. He's a £60 million player, and I wouldn't worry too much about fitness levels now because he's up there now.
Yeah, he's got himself back into a physical state, which means he can do what Eddie Howe wants him to do in terms of pressing from the front. There was a couple of great examples on Sunday where he's sprinting across from the centre halves to the fullbacks to close them down, winning the ball back, put them under pressure. I think, if I remember right, the first goal actually came from Isak in terms of chasing down, putting pressure on. I think, was it De Gea or one of the centre halves, and the ball goes out for a throw in, and that's when up in the final third, and that's where Newcastle were able to build from that. I know you're taking it back 2 or 3 steps, but it came from there. From his from his work rate, which he's obviously, he's added to his game over the last kind of month or so as his fitness is improved. It's a very good point, I think, about, you know, Newcastle put so much into the game on Sunday in terms of the work rate and in the intensity, being able to maintain that level, you know, 3 games in 6 days is going to be difficult, and Eddie Howe may have to freshen his team up a little bit. Well, you know, he may have to give, you know, Alexander Isak a little bit more of a rest, but he's got Callum Wilson who can come in, who was excellent off the bench as well, obviously on Sunday, and got himself a goal. You've got Joe Linton, you've got, you know, Anthony Gordon. Like you say, Steve, that bench looked really strong on Sunday, a lot stronger than what it has in recent years and recent seasons, and probably in recent weeks as well. So getting those players back will hopefully allow him to rest players if he feels that they need a rest. Obviously, Joe Willock might be a bit of a doubt for Wednesday, but the players put so much into it, and that's when Newcastle are at the best for me, is when they play with that high press, the intensity, the work rate, the, you know, getting players in and around the opposition and winning the ball back and not giving them any time. They've got to maintain that intensity levels, I think, as best as possible between now and the end of the season, because that's where Newcastle are at the best. We saw, you know, for a spell probably a month or two ago when them levels dropped slightly and they weren't winning the ball back in as high enough positions, and they weren't. You know, if you looked at the running stats and the pressing stats, they did drop off markedly for a month or so, but they seem to be back now. And if Newcastle played full throttle, there's not many teams that will be able to live with them.
No, definitely not. ASM, often maligned on this channel by Malcolm and Gibbo. You know, they're not fans of ASM, but he put a shift in just like everybody else did, and he got an assist, Ross, more importantly.
He did. Look, I'll hold my hands up. I'm not his biggest fan. I think he's a fantastic player and a great character. He frustrates me a little bit in terms of his end product and everything else like that. But you cannot criticise the way that he has adapted his game under Eddie Howe. You know, he is certainly bought into what Eddie Howe's trying to do with this Newcastle team. His work rate is much, much better. He gets back and gives Dan Burn or the midfield a lot more protection, and he's certainly an outlet when he gets that ball 1-on-1. I thought Man United didn't deal with him at all well on Sunday. I thought they left him 1-on-1 against Dalot far too often, and he was able to go outside, chop back in on his inside onto the right, or go onto his left foot as well and get some dangerous balls in. Like I say, I thought it was one of his best performances in a Newcastle shirt recently, because he married the forward play and the trickery and the ability to draw a draw defender. He married it with good end product and with work rate going back the other way in his defensive side of things. So, look, will ASM be a Newcastle player next season or long term? I'm still not 100% convinced, but he's doing everything possible to fit himself into Eddie Howe's team, to be an important part of the makeup, to show that he's got a future at Newcastle. I don't think he could have done any more really on the back of Sunday's performance.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And then it's gonna be vitally important. John says, from nowhere, our bench looks strong. I'm a big fan of the underrated Manquillo as well. How vital is this for the remainder of the season? It's very vital, isn't it? Because, you know, 3 games this week, you might pick up an injury, a suspension. You just don't know. You know, having strength and depth and having players who can come in and adapt to the system that Eddie Howe's set out is vitally important.
It is. You need more than your starting 11. That's been proven in the past with Newcastle. They need 14, 15, 16, 17 players who can all come in and do a job without the levels dipping too much. You know, bear in mind Miguel Almiron's still out injured and could be for a little while yet. Bear in mind that they haven't properly replaced 1 or 2 players like, you know, John Joe Shelby in the summer. In January, sorry. So there's still a couple of gaps in that squad. But when you've got a bench that has Joe Linton on, arguably the player of the season last year, where you've got Anthony Gordon, a £40 million signing, who's starting to get up to to speed a little bit. You've got Callum Wilson in England international, and then you've got Jamal Lascelles, the club captain. You've got Manquillo, you've got Martin Dubravka, you've got a couple of other options. Elliot Anderson's done really well recently when he's come off the bench, so it's starting to look a lot stronger. You've got to be a little bit cautionary about it because it still only takes one or two injuries to weaken that. It's still not as strong as what we would probably like it, and probably what Eddie Howe would like it. If you take Bruno out of there, or you take Sven Botman out of there, or something like that, it is still a little bit light in certain areas, but it's certainly going in the right direction. And he's got players, I think, there that he trusts, and players that he thinks that he can bring in, and making a triple substitution, which the plan was at one point, and midway through the second half, and bringing on Joe Linton, Anthony Gordon, Callum Wilson, that really is strength and depth. So it was great to see, and hopefully we can keep a clean bill of health between now and the end of the season as well.
Yeah, but that's it. Yeah, it's down to look. We've got a bit of rub of the green as well, I felt. We were good. We did play well against Manchester United, but we did get that little bit of rub of the green, which you sometimes need, Ross, at any level of football.
Absolutely. I think, whatever game, whatever level that you play at, Steve, you're gonna have moments in games, you're gonna have moments in seasons where you need a little bit of fortune, and sometimes the luck goes for you, and sometimes it goes against you. Like to think that it evens itself out over the season. I'd be interested to hear what people thought about the penalty shout on Bruno Fernandes. I know he's a pain in the backside, and I know he makes the most of things, and he whinges and whines on a little bit, but in real time, I thought, oh dear me, that's a little bit. I was worried about that one. I felt on another day that could have potentially gone against you. I'm not saying it was a penalty, but I can see that in some games, decisions like that go against you. But overall, Newcastle were absolutely deserved winners. Could have won 4 or 5 on another day if Joe Willock takes a couple of chances in the first half. If they take a couple of the opportunities that they had in the second half as well, it could have quite comfortably been 4 or 5, and I don't think Man United would have had any reason to complain at all.
Were you surprised at the post-match interviews from Luke Shaw in particular and Ten Hag? I found them quite disrespectful, Ross.
No, I didn't, Steve. No, to be honest, I thought they were very honest. I thought. I had no issue with them. I thought Newcastle were the better team, but they were the better team because they were hungrier. They had more desire. I thought I was quite comfortable with that. Newcastle showed a lot more desire and a lot more hunger, and that's a big part of football. I don't think at the top level that there's often too much between players and too much between teams. You can pick out 1 or 2 players who are clearly world class, who are clearly better than most in that league, but the rest of it, I don't think there's too much difference between a lot of the players. You're a Premier League player because you've got a level of ability. Now the rest of it comes down to motivation, it comes down to desire, it comes down to tactics, it comes down to a lot of things. Newcastle got their tactical plan absolutely spot on. They were hungrier, they were more determined, had more desire. If I was being brutally honest, Man United bottled it, absolutely bottled it. That doesn't mean that Man United aren't a good team, because they are a good team with good players. They had a couple who are out of form. Rashford didn't look himself. The midfield doesn't look the same without Casemiro in. And I think they got rattled. They got rattled very, very easily by Newcastle. Now that's not taking anything away from Newcastle, taking anything away from the ability of the team, because they were the better team in possession. They were a better team out of possession. They were a better team mentality wise. They were the better team in terms of hunger and desire. They were the better team tactically as well. They absolutely smashed Man United on all levels. I don't mind Luke Shaw and Ten Hag coming out and criticising Newcastle's Man United's mentality and saying, and kind of insinuating that if they'd had that they're still the better team. I've got no problem at all with that, because it's such a massive part of the game. I thought it was fair enough, to be honest.
Yeah, I just felt, there was a lack of respect, which is what David John Cook says. They didn't acknowledge that we outplayed them. There was almost this like shock factor. Maybe they were shocked. Maybe they were like the rabbits on Watership Down, eyes stuck in the headlights. I don't know, but some people felt the same, but you clearly have a different view on it, which I completely respect. Fake.
I see where people come from. I absolutely do. Like I say, I've got no issue with it. I think that, look, Man United, clearly there's an issue there between the two clubs. There's that some of the stuff that's gone on in terms of the comments between the managers. There was a little bit of needle and aggro on the sidelines. I personally, Luke Shaw, I didn't think that he disrespected Newcastle. Ten Hag, maybe you could argue that Ten Hag in the whole build up and everything else like that there's been a lack of respect there. I don't think Luke Shaw's comments were massively disrespectful. I think he was more annoyed and upset and angry at his own players, at his own teammates, at his own performance, rather than and it was trying to make that point rather than disrespect Newcastle. But like you say, Steve, it's all about opinions, and I was relatively happy with it.
No, 100%, mate. It's interesting. A comment earlier on, I can't remember who made it now, just saying they probably wouldn't take any of Manchester United's players, ahead of the players that we've got. Which I know we can get a little bit carried away when you win a game like that. I'd probably take one or two. I love the centre half, the Argentinian. I think he's a cracking little player. I'd love to have him in our team, if I'm perfectly honest. I did scratch my head at a guy who I met earlier this week who said he would love to have Maguire at Newcastle. With Fabian Schär's career coming to an end, he'd take Maguire. I don't know where he was coming from with that particular quote, but they've certainly got some good players in there. I don't think McTominay did a chance of a move to Newcastle any good at the weekend, mind.
No, you're probably right. And again, I'll be honest here. I don't mind McTominay. I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of his in the world, but I can see why Newcastle are interested in him. I can see why Eddie Howe might like him. I can see what he would bring to Newcastle. I actually thought for the first 25 minutes, half an hour maybe, I thought he played okay. I thought he pressed really well. He niggled away at Bruno and at Sean Longstaff and one or two others, and then he got him, as well as the rest of the Man United midfield, they just got blown away by Newcastle. They couldn't cope with it over 90 minutes. The relentlessness, the press, and the aggression, everything else that came with it from Newcastle. So, I don't. You're probably right. You look at that midfield three for Man United, and it was nowhere near the standards that Newcastle put in on that day. So, but I'm sure Newcastle and the scouts and the recruitment will be monitoring performances over a longer period of time than obviously just that game. In terms of Man United's squad, I would take 3 or 4 comfortably from there. And I think Marcus Rashford is one heck of a player and would fit into most Premier League teams. I agree with you, Steve. Martinez, the centre half, excellent player. Luke Shaw's a really, really good left back. I don't think he had his best game on Sunday, but he's a great player. Casemiro's obviously an outstanding player in that centre mid. They've got a lot of big names. They've got a lot of big players, but this isn't a Man United team of old. Absolutely not. They don't have that absolute strength. They don't have that. They don't have them 8 or 9 or 10 world-class players in the squad like they've had previously.
They've suffered a bit because of managerial changes. I mean, I know that the owners tend to handpick players. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that when Ronaldo was brought in, that was a decision made at the top without really the manager having much of a choice. If the manager had a choice, he wouldn't have brought Ronaldo in, and that's the problem with Manchester United and Chelsea. They've got owners who literally just say, we're going to go and buy that player and, get on with it to the managers. And it causes arguments in the dressing room. And that's what's happened with Manchester United. I think, you were always going to have Pogba and Ronaldo, 2 huge egos in the game, going head to head with each other and not, if they got on, great. But if they don't get on, woe betide anybody trying to manage them. And that's what's happened. Chelsea's the same. They've signed some brilliant players. And there's no guarantees, but I'd put money on Chelsea finding some results now that they've got rid of Potter, because Potter must any player who's come into there with the price tags that they've got and what they've won in other leagues must come in and go, who on earth is this guy? It's where football is.
Yeah, for me, Steve, I think it's more about the structures that you put in around players and around teams and around clubs. So Chelsea's structure at the minute is pure scattergun. It's, you know, we'll sign this player, we'll sign that player, we'll sign the whole process around Graham Potter has been an absolute farce. You know, they've gone out and identified Graham Potter as the manager that they want for the next 5 years, handing him a big 5-year contract, paid £21 million in compensation and to Brighton, and then just bombarding him with all these players. Some of them he'd probably be happy. Others he'd be looking, thinking, well, I don't need this player, I don't need that player. I just need to get a settled squad, and throwing in Mudryk for 80 million and Enzo Fernandez for 100 million and this, that, and the other. It looks great on paper, but you need that structure. You need to have the manager who buys into the recruitment, who identifies players and says, yeah, these are the ones that I'm happy with. These are the ones that I'm not happy with. If you look at Man United, obviously got rid of, Ten Hag, I think, has done a really good job there. And he got rid of Ronaldo by hook or by crook in December, but then wasn't allowed to bring anybody in to replace him. So they needed a striker, and he's told, well, we've got no money, we're skint. You can sign somebody on loan, and he brings in Wout Weghorst, who wouldn't get a game, if we're being honest, in most Premier League teams this season. He got relegated with Burnley at the end of last season, so he's not a Man United player. But because the ownership have saddled Man United with so much debt, and the financial situation is a bit tighter than what you would expect of a club of that size, then Ten Hag he's almost managing. He's not managing with one hand behind his back. That's it. That's over exaggerating. But he's not being allowed that kind of free rein to build his squad yet to get the players in that he wants. And that's the same at Chelsea. It's the same at a number of clubs where the recruitment team and the management team and everything around that club isn't all singing off the same hymn sheet, on all fully aligned. And that'll be that. Everything's good at Newcastle at the minute, but that will be one challenge that will present itself at some point when they start looking at different players and different profiles and models of players. Is can the recruitment team and Dan Ashworth and Steve Nixon and everybody else around that, are they fully aligned with what Eddie Howe wants? Sorry, with a player. Is Eddie Howe's profile and desire from a player different to what actually the recruitment team think, and getting that all aligned, and there will be some arguments, there will be some disagreements. Everyone's not going to agree on a player. A player that you think's good, Steve, isn't necessarily a player that I think's great, and it'll be the same. The type of player that Eddie Howe potentially wants might be different to what Dan Ashworth or Steve Nixon or whoever I think, or Amanda Staveley or whoever it is might think as well. So getting that, as a club grows, and you're fighting over bigger pools of players, getting everything aligned is going to be a challenge for Newcastle moving forward as well, I think.
Yeah, good point, man. Thanks for that. He says De Gea, Casemiro, Martinez, and Rashford are the players that he would suggest probably players that could walk into Newcastle's team. De Gea, maybe he's not so much goalkeeping wise. In the past, I would have agreed. I think he's on the decline now. Casemiro, no doubt, Manchester United missed him at the weekend. Martinez, good player. Rashford, again, good player, good quality. I mean, Newcastle, would love to have a player of Rashford's quality up front, feeding off the midfield that we've got. Bruno, Big Joe, Willock, Botman, Shaw, Trips, Isak, Pope, some of our quality players. Yeah, and it's great that list is growing. Gordon, again, is a quality player. From a Man U point of view, they've earned the right to play in big games at this squeaky time of the season, and they can't get it right in every game. We'll need to rise to that challenge in the future, which is a good point. David John Cook says De Gea is a shot stopper. He hasn't got the command over his box, in my opinion. And Rashford still trying to find his way out of Trippier's pocket. Yeah, he had a great game, Trippier. And I would agree with that. I wouldn't take any Man U players because they are playing their sistrals. And I was in the Gallagher for a change and nearly needed transferring to the RVI when Pope miscontrolled that back pass in the second half. Okay, halfway through the programme, time for the ads.
Big thanks to all our sponsors. Thanks to Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. And you can find them at mrvickies.co.uk. Email info@mrvickies.co.uk and place an order by phoning 01768 210 102. Thanks to Fruy Vita Getaways. Book your holidays or short breaks in the UK or around the world with them. Let them find your happy place. ABTA and ATOL registered. You can contact them by emailing fruivitagetaways@gmail.com. Call or text 0792 842 7895 and join their Facebook group at Fruy Vita Getaways. Thanks to Media Arts for all the technical help and videos that they do. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. If you want to join the channel, click join and you can see the various rates that you can pay to help support us. If you want to join by subscribing, hit the subscribe button. That is free. Hit the thumb up under the video to help the algorithm, and click share to other social media platforms. If you do subscribe, we do give you a free car sticker. Just email John at nufcmatters.com and he will post you one out. If you want to join the cult, which is a one-off payment of £25, where you get a scarf, a pen, a cup, and entry into the monthly draw, then go to nufcmatters.com and look for the cult membership, or put your phone over this smart code and it will take you straight there. We are available as well as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest. And we do support the food bank on this channel. So if you want to make a virtual donation from anywhere in the world, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and put your money into the match day bucket. We've got some events coming up. First off in April the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th and 11th. Peter Beardsley Soccer School is back for ages 6 to 16 years. Go to peterbeardsleysoccerschool.com for more information. An evening with John Anderson at the Time House Surf Cafe, Tuesday the 18th of April. Book your tickets direct from the venue. An evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson 2 nights later, Thursday the 20th of April at the Irish Centre. Tickets from nufcmatters.com. An evening with Nobby Solano at Laurel's in Whitley Bay is May the 11th. So contact the venue direct if you want to go to that event. And we've got our NUFC Matters end of season party, which is the 27th of May at 7 o'clock. Tickets are a tenner from nufcmatters.com. An evening with Rob Lee at Louis Liquor Store, 1st of June, and tickets direct from the venue. And an evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark and John Beresford, Friday the 2nd of June at the Grand Hotel Gosforth, which is in aid of the Healing Tour charity. And you can get your tickets direct from them at the healingtour.org.uk website. Just click events. A little bit later in the year, an evening with Gavin Peacock, July the 10th. Tickets from nufcmatters.com for that one. And if you like your boxing, a night of champions featuring Frank Bruno, Ricky Hatton, Nigel Benn and Joe Calzaghe. Tickets for that one from goldstarpromotions.com.
Don't forget as well, if you go on our website, nufcmatters.com, some nice t-shirts there. The latest one from John is Isak. Nice design, that one. Get yourself onto the website for that. And get yourself to the website for the Alan Shearer signed ball raffle. Enter at nufcmatters.com. Only £1 a ticket, and you could be the winner of a wonderful signed Alan Shearer football. And last couple of days for the Anthony Gordon signed and framed Newcastle United shirt from footballprizes.co.uk. Just go to the link, and it finishes 7:30 tomorrow, April the 5th. God, the year's flying past as it usually does. I just want to bring up a topic that came up last night as well on the show, which was Trippier. Does Trippier play better, do you think, with Jacob Murphy on the right-hand side as opposed to Almiron, Ross? Because he was going through what might be described as a bit of a dip in form. You know, I mean, he's still been superb, still tops the stats charts for right backs and defenders in the Premier League this season. But, you know, he just seemed to be making some fairly basic errors, whether that was because he was under a little bit more pressure because Almiron likes to bomb forward. But Murphy coming in, he seems to have upped his game. And it was a wonderful pinpoint, delivery for Callum Wilson to get the second goal. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think he necessarily plays better with one or the other, to be honest. I think some of Kieran Trippier's best performances in a Newcastle shirt have been when Miggy Almiron's been in front of him, in the link up that them two have. I quite liked, certainly earlier in the season when Almiron would come inside a little bit, and it would allow Trippier that space to go around the outside on an overlap. I think that was one of Newcastle's most potent attacking weapons. With that almost like that three in there or four, I suppose, if you class Bruno as well. But you had Sean Longstaff, Miggy Almiron, and Kieran Trippier as a little trio in there. Then Bruno would come in and start feeding little balls into Almiron, who would come off the right flank, or he would like I say, he would find Trippier on the overlap. So I think he had a dip in form. I don't think there's any doubt in that. He had 2 or 3 or 4 games where he wasn't quite at the high standards that he's shown, Kieran Trippier, in recent seasons. But when you've got a player of his quality, I think sometimes them little dips get noticed a little bit more. I think Jacob Murphy coming in has certainly added a different dimension to Newcastle, and he is a bit more defensive minded and orientated. That's not to say Miggy Almiron doesn't do the same, because he tracks back and his work rate is really impressive. But Jacob Murphy's, he had something a little bit different. He's probably because he plays a bit wider, I think, than Almiron. It doesn't mean necessarily that Trippier is going to bomb on as much. So he's a little bit more defensive focused. But yeah, I don't think he plays better with one or the other. I think he's just an exceptional player, both going forward and defensively. Kieran Trippier certainly the best right back that I've seen at Newcastle in a long time.
Yeah, Martinez successfully tackled Isak off, fair play, great defender. He did have a good game. David John Cook says, Potter isn't used to be around these superstars, so don't know what his best team was and how to set them up out of depth. Maybe got to agree. Mankman says, Newcastle are having a good season. Do you think Eddie Howe will have any success in the Champions League, qualifying for knockouts, or do you think owners will want a high-profile manager for their ambitions? Good question, Mankman, from a supporter of Manchester United. I guess the proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's he's going to have some money to spend, Ross, as well. There's players going out. Newcastle have already adhered to financial fair play rules, didn't go mad in January, so money will be spent. I guess we see what happens over the course of the next couple of years. It's enjoyable for us, but I think Howe has what it takes to be a successful manager.
I think he's got the work ethic. I think he's got the tactical knowledge and nous to certainly be a success at whatever level he tries. But until you get there, you just never know. People talking about Graham Potter being out of his depth at Chelsea. Until you move to another club and you experience something different, and you experience Champions League football and European football and managing players with different egos and different profiles and priorities, then you never know. And that'll be the same with Eddie Howe. As Newcastle develop and evolve, they in get into European football, then Eddie Howe's not going to have that experience until he's actually tested there. So you've got to give people that opportunity. Everybody starts somewhere. Nobody goes in. Everybody's got to have their first game in Europe. Everybody's got to have their first taste of it. I think you can't fault Eddie Howe. He's the job that he's done so far. He's barely put a foot wrong, and going and playing in Europe next season, if it is next season. I'm sure he'll adapt and take to it. I'm sure he'll find that there's different challenges, and he has to adapt his style in some ways. And in that element of going kind of, whether it's Thursday, Sunday, or Wednesday, Saturday, playing them 2 games in a week, high profile, intense games twice a week, with a lot of traveling and stuff involved as well. That'll be a challenge for Eddie Howe, and something that he's not experienced before. But yeah, long term, the club may decide that they want to go with a different profile of a manager. But I don't really see it personally at the minute. If Eddie Howe's doing the job that he's asked for, it doesn't matter whether his name's Eddie Howe or Zinedine Zidane or whatever. I don't think Newcastle are bothered about big names at the minute. I don't think they're bothered about that high profile thing. I think they want competent, good people, and Eddie Howe is certainly one of those.
Yeah, I see the chat going backwards and forwards between Mankman and a few Newcastle fans, and I see both points. I think what some people are missing is that, and maybe Mankman would agree. The question was a good one. Would Eddie Howe be able to cope with the Champions League? Personally, I think he can. I think Eddie Howe is very similar to Alex Ferguson. He's come from a darker place. He's come from time out of the game. He's come from relegation with Bournemouth. He had an opportunity to go away and reinvent himself and look at the way, why did he fail? He looked at himself and he's done the work to improve. And Alex Ferguson was having a bad time at Manchester United before that goal that got them to the cup final and ultimately they won the FA Cup final. It was he didn't do very well, and he did well at Aberdeen, of course, but there was dark times in Scotland for Ferguson as well. So you never know. We might have unearthed, the next, Sir Alex Ferguson in Eddie Howe. And I think the point I was making before about Graham Potter, for example, is that unlike Eddie Howe, it doesn't appear that Potter had much of an opportunity to say who he wanted to come into Chelsea this season. So, for example, January, they were just going crazy, bringing players in left, right and centre. And I heard Potter on more than one occasion asked about the player they brought in, and he said he didn't really know a great deal about him. So the difference being that Howe is actually part and parcel of the process, along with Dan Ashworth and the owners. And there's a shortlist drawn up, and he's talking it through, and they're talking it through and saying, right, okay, this is who we want. And, Eddie already mentioned in the press conference last week, he's already drawn up his list. He started to draw up his list for the summer, which could change depending on personnel, who are at the club or who else they might be able to attract. So it's a different ball game for Newcastle. And I don't think you'll see, Newcastle bringing in a player of the stamp of Ronaldo. If it's not what Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth want, then he won't come in. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. It really will be. It's a great position for us to be in. We'll carry on. Go on.
Well, sorry, just one more point on that, Steve, as well. I think part of management, and people on the chat and watching and everything else like that, they'll be involved. They'll be managers potentially at different levels of their jobs and their industries. And I'm a manager in my job. And I'm not saying it's the same as football. I'm not saying it's the same pressure and anything like that. But you can take certain aspects of management and adapt them. And part of management isn't just about managing the people that are underneath you, but it's about managing upwards as well. You've got to manage your boss. You've got to be able to manage sideways, upwards. You've got to be able to deal with different challenges. And I think for Graham Potter, if we use that as an example, I think Graham Potter is a fantastic coach. I think he will come back and he will be a huge success. I hope that he's taken the learnings of Chelsea and he can adapt them in when he goes into his next job. He perhaps found that the difficulty managing upwards, managing the owners, managing his relationship with owners in terms of the signings, and he might reflect. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing, but he might reflect back and say, "I wish I'd stood up to them a little bit more and said no. Actually, I don't want this player. I don't want this situation." And that might be something that he reflects on. Eddie Howe has had a lot of success in his career, but like you say, Steve, he's also had disappointment at Bournemouth, how it finished there, and he's gone away and he's reflected and he's learned from that. How Eddie Howe manages his players, his coaching staff, but also how he manages upwards in terms of, or sideways in terms of the relationships that he has with Steve Nixon and the recruitment team and Dan Ashworth and Mana Stavely and everybody else that's around the club will be really important for him moving forward, as much as the relationships that he's managing in terms of players and coaches.
Yeah. Okay. Tom Dixon put a question in earlier on. He said, "Do you think it's the right time to sack a manager with Rodgers and Potter gone? I wouldn't be surprised if Leicester went for Benitez." I mean, strange time to sack a manager. I mean, 7 months in the job for Potter. Clearly a job that was too big for him, or clearly the fact that the owners have had a lot more say than maybe he's the manager. But then, Brendan Rodgers, I think they could have sacked him at Christmas. They gave him enough time, I think, Rodgers. What's your thoughts on those two respective sackings?
I think Rodgers was inevitable. I think he's, I think he's a really talented coach and manager, regardless of what some of the way that he comes across sometimes. But I think I think his record, what he did at Liverpool without being able to get over the line was really impressive. Going up to Celtic, and I know it's the SPL, and you can say most managers, if they're at Celtic or Rangers, will experience some success. He was fantastic. Won the treble if you like before he left for Leicester. And the job that he's done at Leicester, he's taken them. I know they'd won the Premier League under Ranieri and whatever, but he established a style of play and a consistency there at Leicester, which was outstanding. Getting them on the verge of Champions League, a couple of times, winning the FA Cup, done a brilliant job. But it's obviously this season it's fallen away, and there's obviously issues in terms of the revenues and the transfer budget and being able to bring players in, the needed strengthening. And sometimes managers just go stale and players stop listening to managers as well. So there might be an element of that. So wasn't surprised that Rodgers went. It was obviously clear that a change needed at Leicester. I was a little bit surprised at Potter in the sense that I'm a big Potter fan, and I hope that they will give him a little bit more time. And I felt that he's maybe the job is too big for him. Maybe he needed a different step at this point in his career. But I suppose with Chelsea, it gives them a little bit of time now to assess between now and the end of the season what they want to do and bring somebody in for the start of potentially for next season, rather than getting too long. They're not going to get relegated. They're not going to get into Europe. It's probably not a bad time to depart with a manager then. But Leicester, they're bang in a relegation fight now. It's going to be interesting to see what their next move is.
And you look how tight the bottom is. It's just, it was similar last season. Newcastle managed the great escape, because of the tightness. Up to 12th again. Anybody could go down. It's a hard one to call, Ross, isn't it?
Oh, it's so tight. It's great this season because the bottom man, that pretty much every game has got something riding on it. At the minute, I know there's still 10, 11 games left, and by the time we get to 2 or 3 games left, there might these situations and issues might have resolved themselves by then. But at the minute, every game's got something on it. Whether it's you look and think, oh, that's potentially a mid-table game, but it's not, because teams in the middle of the table in 12th, 13th, 14th are only 4 points off the relegation zone, and teams that are 8th and 9th, they're looking thinking, well, I'm only a handful of places off a handful of points off a European spot. So it's really tight. Being able to call who gets relegated, being able to predict that it's fluctuating game by game. Just when you think one team is in bother, they go and pull a win out of the bag. Bournemouth have had a couple of good results, for example, and then Palace under Roy Hodgson, go and grab a win. But they're still only a couple of points away from the drop zone, so it's going to be a real tight one between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, Tom's interested to know how many points we think Newcastle will get from West Ham, Brentford, and Aston Villa. It's very rare that you get 3 away games together, Ross. Obviously, the West Ham game was rearranged after the death of the Queen. So, this is a big period, isn't it? This was always going to be a big period in the season if we were chasing a European spot. And for me personally, I think 7 points from those 3 away games would be enough to put the pressure well and truly on Tottenham and Manchester United. They've got some hard games coming up as well. And then it leads us nicely into playing Spurs at home at the end of April, doesn't it? It's exciting, man. It's exciting for all the right reasons. I certainly think we can get a win tomorrow night. I'm going to take Newcastle to beat West Ham. Brentford, I think, is a tough game of the 3. But down there last season, we were comprehensively, we got the result against them. We did the job. I think will be too much for Brentford. I think 2 wins against West Ham and Brentford, and I think a point against Villa. And I know Villa have got nothing to play for. They can't go down, but I don't think they'll be able to qualify, unless they put a fantastic run together. I think they're just going to miss out on Europe. So I think Aston Villa have got nothing to play for, but I do think that'll be the tougher game. It's 7 points, I think, is doable. But I think 2 wins against West Ham, Brentford, and a draw against Villa is how we'll get our 7 points. Are you more confident than me or less confident?
I think it's a really, really tricky run of games. Three away games on the bounce. 4 out of the next 5 away games. 4 out of the next 5 games are away from home, and the home game is Spurs. So the next 5 games will probably make or break, I think, for the season. And you can look at it and think, yeah, look, Newcastle are on form, are a better team than West Ham. They're a better team than Brentford, and they're a better team than Aston Villa. But those 3 teams are all dangerous opponents. West Ham are scrapping and fighting for their lives, and with with the points I suppose, West Ham, they've had a poor season, but they're not a poor team. They've got some excellent players in there, and if they click on the day, I think it's another tough game on the road. I would, from those 3 games, Brentford I think is a difficult one as well. Villa are in really, really good form. Under Unai Emery, who could have been obviously at Newcastle if things had worked out slightly differently 18 months or so ago, is a really, really good manager, and I think they've won 4 out of 5, or they're unbeaten in the last 5. Villa, so again another team in good form. So if I was being honest, I would probably take 5 points out of those 3 games. I would take a win and a couple of draws, or certainly 6. Anything more than that is a real bonus for me. So 5 or 6 points out of those 3 games would do me going into the Spurs game. Having Spurs at home, I think, is a very, very winnable game based on how Newcastle have performed against Man United, and then it's Everton away, which is another tricky one. With them scrapping for their lives, going to Goodison's never an easy place to go, especially when
we've got Anthony Gordon this time though, Ross. We've got Anthony Gordon.
Yeah, you're right. I just think these five games, the next 5 games will make or break the kind of the Champions League qualification push.
Yeah, I genuinely think Newcastle will have a good run in. I think we've started another run. 3 wins out of 3, beating Man United in a very important game. I think now, we need to capitalise on it. And I think Eddie Howe, I'll listen and I'll review his press conference in a couple of hours' time. So keep an eye on that on the channel. But I would be surprised if he's just said, look, we're just concentrating on West Ham. And he won't set a target. He's already mentioned it this season. He won't be setting targets. And maybe he has to the team, maybe him and Kieran Trippier and the rest of the coaching staff are looking at it and saying, yeah, this is where we want to be. But, they'll not tell the media. They'll not tell anybody, that's for certain. Newcastle are starting to click. If this was a title run-in, I'd be excited. Perfect timing. It's all good experience. 3-0 win at West Ham, says Geordie Toon for life. What position does Ross think we'll finish? No chickening out. What number will we Fiona's have Wickham sign McTominay for next season? I'm not sure if he's talking about Wickham or whether he's talking about Newcastle. Give us a prediction for Newcastle, as it is a Newcastle podcast.
I think Newcastle will finish 4th. I think based on the weekend, based on the run of form, if they can keep everybody fit and maintain the levels, the intensity levels, I think it will be very, very tight. But I see Newcastle finishing 4th this season. But look, even if they miss out on the Champions League, even if it's 5th or 6th or whatever it is, it's been an outstanding season. It's been an outstanding achievement from Eddie Howe and these players. But I'm as confident as I've been this season now that they can go on and finish with a real flourish and grab that last Champions League place.
Yeah, I'll answer the question as well. I think Newcastle will finish 3rd. I think there's enough in the team. I think there's enough in the tank, and I think we're starting to learn how to score goals. I know that Newcastle missed a few opportunities, 22 shots at goal on Sunday and only 2 goals scored, but credit to here, pulled off some great saves. Newcastle, as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier on as well, just need to learn how to keep the ball down. Joe Willock's a big culprit of blasting and blazing the ball over the bar, when a little bit more time and a bit more control and accuracy, and the ball's in the back of the net, and Newcastle are, 1 up, 2 up, 3 up early doors. Because I think that was the half-time chatter at the weekend. Newcastle should have been 3 or 4-0 up. They should have been out of sight. And it's dangerous when you don't do that against big teams, because ultimately they will have an opportunity and they tend to take it with the bigger players. So, we're not in that position yet. We will be there sooner rather than later with, the next couple of transfer windows. But we do need to start, putting our chances away. So, I think third. Ross thinks fourth, but again, I'll agree and concur with what Ross says, that wherever Newcastle finish, it's been an absolutely fantastic season. Still double figures to go in games, but still a lot of game time to enjoy. But yeah, it's been fantastic. And you think about it, Almiron's out injured, he's out for 4 weeks. It would have been a big miss at the start of the season. Now no one's even questioning it, because you've got Gordon, you've got Murphy performing well. And what we really need now is if ASM comes into his own in this last 10 or 11 games, after having a very below par season by his own standards, it is literally like having a new player. And it's just exciting. Got to be excited. What's your predictions, says Tom? So Newcastle, of course, have a game tomorrow night. West Ham United away, the rearranged game. It's a 8 o'clock kickoff live on Sky Sports. All 3,000 away tickets have been sold out as per usual. Newcastle are unbeaten in all 4 Premier League visits to London so far this season. God, imagine saying that a few years back. Couldn't win in London, couldn't buy a win in London. That's that in itself should give you a bit of confidence. And in East 20, as the postcode goes, they have lost just 1 of the 5 visits, winning 3 times and drawn there once. Probably our most productive ground for us. Certainly a productive ground for Callum Wilson as well, as he's scored 3 times in 4 games against them for Newcastle. If you add his Bournemouth tally to that, his figures against West Ham are 10 goals in 12 appearances. Miggy Almiron still out another 3.5 weeks for that young man. There was an injury doubt over Joe Willock. As I say, I haven't had time to listen to the press conference today, so I'm not sure if there has been an update on his fitness battle. But knowing Eddie Howe, he'll be playing his cards, as always, close to his chest. Skamaka is out for West Ham. Other than that, West Ham have a full squad. They did get a 1-0 home win over Southampton in the Premier League at the weekend. So, David Coote is on VAR. Craig Parsons, the referee. What's your prediction for this one, Ross?
I think it's going to be a difficult, a tight game. I think Newcastle are the better team, but it's a quick turnaround, after Sunday, and hopefully the players have re-energized, recharged the batteries after the kind of the exertions that they put in at St James's on Sunday. Joe Willock, I've listened to the press conference. I've seen it. Eddie Howe was, you're right, Steve was very coy about Joe Willock. Said he hadn't had a chance to see him this morning yet and assess him, but so he'll make that decision closer to the kickoff. I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps us, if Joe Willock's fit, he keeps the same team because of how well they played on Sunday. And I'm going to go for a 1-0 win. I think it's going to be tight. I'm really pleased that Newcastle got the clean sheet against Man United. You're right about the need to be more clinical. And take their chances and be a bit more composed in the final third. But that was the first clean sheet in a while for the defensive success and solidity that they've shown this season. That was the first clean sheet in a few games. So great to see that back. If they can replicate that defensive performance again against West Ham, then I think they'll sneak a 1-0 win.
Yeah, I'm going for a 1-0 win as well. I think it'll be tight. I think Isak will be the difference between the two teams, but I'm predicting a win 100%. Trolls, thank you very much. And Trolls, ASM's getting some credit this week. I know you're a big supporter of ASM. I do think he's getting a bit of credit this week. And even Malcolm, if you watch the NUFC Matters Live from the Dog and Parrot, even he was positive about ASM. Only a bit, but we're getting there. He's slowly winning them round. As always, thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to the moderators. I will be back a little bit later on with Eddie Howe's press conference review. I know Ross will be off to Wickham's match and I'm off to watch Dunstan play tonight. So some busy non-league end of season games coming up. So that's why we've done the show a bit earlier tonight. But Ross, thanks very much, mate. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, pal.
Cheers, Steve. Cheers, everyone.